Hello and welcome. I'm Simonon and I shall be leading the unit today. It's called the Alpha and the Omega, Beginnings and Endings.
Hi, I'm Megan. I'm going to be participating on the course as well as helping out the ICT.
Thank you, Megan. And without further ado, can we start with the first slide, please?
Yes, we can.
So, the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last letter of the Greek alphabet, it comes to us in the Christian tradition from a phrase in the book of Revelations, where Jesus says, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end. Now, behind that thought, behind those words then, is the idea that when we complete something, there's always the possibility that an ending will be a beginning. In a very obvious sense, this course is coming to an end. This is the final unit, so it's an ending. But it also has the possibility of being a beginning of further exploration, a beginning of developing some kind of relationship with Jesus, or maybe beginning exploring in some quite other direction. And here we have the symbol of the Ouroboros, the snake eating its tail. It was a symbol used by the Gnostics, by the way. They were particularly fond of it. And it has a sense of eternity, of rebirth to it. So in this course, my hope is that anybody watching it will be encouraged to take what they have learned and what understanding they have gained and develop it further, explore further. So the course is simply a beginning. It's at this point then that I turn to the most important person on the course, which is Megan. For her then, this is her exploration, and my invitation is for Megan to say what she feels she might have learned, discovered, any new angles, and above all, what is the image, the understanding of Jesus that emerges from the course. So over to you, Megan.
Absolutely do resonate with that image of beginnings and endings, because I really do feel like this, although it's the ending of this course, I feel like it's the whole beginning to my exploration with Jesus. It's really been wonderful to have the tools which I've never been given before, to have my own exploration of Jesus, find my own truth and find things that resonate with me. The academic side of the course I've enjoyed. It's been really beneficial, like learning about having the context of what was going on at the time of Jesus, where he was in the world, where, you know, the politics that were going on, who was in charge, what was happening, all the global events that were happening around the time of Jesus. I've never had those before, and a lot of the things before this course, I thought, that doesn't really make any sense. Why is that going on? Why is that group of people here? Why is that going on? But now I've got that understanding, and I can put the context into place. And this also means in future, when my exploration continues, I can think, what was happening at the time? What were the cultural norms at the time? Where was it happening? Why was it happening? All those sorts of things, I can apply them now, whereas beforehand I could take them at face value. Now I can think about it a bit more and reflect and explore all of those aspects as well. Especially that I really enjoyed looking at the trade paths on the map. I thought that was really useful. It's helped me have an understanding of how the Christian movement spread throughout the world, because beforehand as I said beforehand, to me it was a European thing, a British thing, whereas now I understand how it was in different parts of the world. That was really, I found that useful. And also knowing that different parts of, like, some gospels weren't included. I never really thought about that beforehand. And to know that such a condensed, only a few views really were given in the Bible, in the Christian Bible, it makes me understand that there was maybe more going on. So that was those people's truths who wrote those gospels that are in the Bible. That was their truth. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the whole truth. It's not necessarily somebody else who was walking along at the same time could have seen it and seen it a completely different way. So it's not discounting their views, but it might not necessarily be the whole truth to me. And so knowing that certain gospels were left out, that's really interesting to me. And also having the gospels, it's secondhand information almost. It's not a diary or a book from Jesus himself. It's the secondhand information, which is of course by not maliciously, but it's always going to be slightly skewed, slightly tampered with from the person's perspectives and beliefs that has written that gospel. So having that knowledge now and that awareness, it can help me to maybe look at things differently and think, they're saying it like this, but maybe it means this, or maybe this happened, and comparing it to other gospels, and I can put two and two together and see how that adds up. I found that really, that academic side of discourse I've enjoyed and I found really useful.
Now, that brings me to the next question, which is why we got the flip chart, is having gone through that process, thank you for your feedback, I'm going to look at the sort of image, the understanding of Jesus that has emerged for you.
Yeah.
So just pen and ready, using both your intellect and your intuition, can you say some of what sort of image emerges in your mind? What's your understanding at the moment of Jesus?
My understanding of Jesus at the moment was that his mission was very relevant at the time, and he was using his love and compassion at the time to spread messages to better things for people at the time when he was around. But I also feel like he was maybe sowing the seeds for love and caring for one another in the future, like an evolutionary process, that he was thinking about what he could do, the seeds he could plant for the future to make the whole world better, make it better for everybody, not just those in direct contact with him at the time.
So we have a fascinating insight here. We have the love and the compassion. This work he's doing at the time, he's healing, for example. But I'm very interested that you've tuned in on this idea of sowing seeds and it being an evolutionary process.
Yeah, I get this image as though he's trying to spread a message of holding each other, almost supporting one another, being a community with one another, and that's a local community, a global community, but just to hold one another in whatever way they need to be held.
Right. Okay. So it's not just the work that he's doing, it's the work that other people, that all of us
Yeah.
can do.
Yeah.
So there's a third element to your picture. There's his love and compassion, work he's done all the time, sowing seeds for the future, and there's work that we can all do to, as you say, hold each other as
Yeah.
a community. I notice you notice there's a global community.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Fascinating.
I get the image that he was a very a kind man, but a very strong man as well. Approachable, patient.
Right.
Yeah, open-minded. A very human, warm element to him.
Yes.
I get an intuitive feeling of a safety with him.
And this is maybe what the children picked up.
Yeah.
He was a safe adult to be with because they're drawn to him.
I see him as a youthful father figure almost. Good with children, bringing out that childlike quality within people, but in a youthful, playful sense at the same time. So there's strong, protective, caring element, as well as the playful, youthful, fun side as well.
Oh, that's interesting. So we have playful, and we have caring. Now, in one of the Gospels that didn't make it into the Bible, there's a very unusual saying, which was, in effect, sometimes when his disciples saw him, he was a child. And I wonder if you're not intuitively picking up on that sense of Jesus both being child, playful, parent, safe.
Yeah, all of those merging together as like a strong father figure, but has the ability to play with the children, to be with the children, connect with the children, and connect with that inner child.
Very much so. And that's absolutely fascinating. Now, I'm bound to ask you this question that goes right to the very beginning of the course. It was something the Jesus seminar said: beware of finding a Jesus that's too congenial to you. In other words, that sort of fits in with your pre-existing image. And the two aspects of that, how far the Jesus you found fitted in with your pre-existing image, and also whether intuitively you feel that the image that has emerged through the Gospels, through your meditation, inner work and so on, whether that kind of resonates, saying, no, that's not just something I believe because I want to believe it, or because it's kind of nice. But it's, no, this feels real to me, this feels authentic.
Yeah, when I was doing the meditation, I think throughout the course, that's the session I really felt. I really enjoyed the others. I found them extremely useful, and I found my own truths within them. But the meditation session, that really felt like it was true and it was real. So real, like it's as if it's in front of me right now. That's like tangible there.
And I think what's really interesting about meditation, guided visualization, it takes you out of the limits, the constraints placed upon us by our intellect, our ego. You shouldn't be thinking this, you must think that. It's much more uncontrolled. It's much freer. And so whatever you experience, you experience. There's no pre-thought to it in that sense, no rationalization. And that is why we set much store to intuition, and for that matter, dreams. Now, I appreciate dreams can have all sorts of stuff going on, but when you get one of those very powerful dreams, like the one I described, rather like your visualization, then it's almost as if being freed from the ordinary constraints of everyday human consciousness, a message that can reach you,
Yeah.
otherwise might be harder. So it very much is the Jesus that you experience is the Jesus that you're describing here. It kind of, if I've got you right, rings true.
Yeah, the Jesus which I experienced during the guided visualization is opposite to the Jesus which I'd known beforehand. It's completely in contrast to any imagery that I've seen of Jesus, anything I've been told of Jesus. I mean, he was glowing, he was bright, he was beautiful. If I can say it, he was the most beautiful man I think I've ever seen. He was absolutely gorgeous, radiant, warm, just strong. The images I've seen of Jesus beforehand have always been meek and mild, almost, I want to say, quite reserved, conservative, not really bright. But the image I saw of Jesus during that guided visualization was so bright, so comforting, so warm, so relatable and human, and I wanted to stay there with him, whereas beforehand, anything I've thought about Jesus before, I've never felt a connection beforehand. But now I've got this image of him, and it really does feel like I've experienced, I've been there with Jesus. It feels true to me. It's incredible the contrast between what I've seen and what I've been told. And as you said before, beliefs can change. My belief has changed, but the truth which I've experienced, I've got that experience forever now.
What's really interesting is the way you describe Jesus is very common in its broad outline of the mystical revelations that women have had. We're talking about so-called Julian of Norwich, but many other women mystics have had when they have described Jesus alive, almost sensual,
Yeah.
living, human, and sort of doesn't fit in with either sort of Jesus meek and mild or the suffering, almost starved being of crucifixion. It's something quite else. And it's really interesting that what you're saying is very recognizable to a historian such as myself as being, it's unique, but on the same kind of wavelength as mystics, women mystics in particular, over the centuries. It's really striking that the image, when you use the intuitive senses, which in a certain sense is direct, there's no stuff in between, the image that comes out is very different. So I'm really interested by what you're saying, and yours is unique, but also the commonality.
Yeah.
And if you do some reading of women mystics of the Middle Ages and the revelations they had and the visions they had of Jesus, you will see that they have a very alive experience of Jesus. So I think that's amazing. So
It is really amazing that it feels wholesome and warm and comforting and loving and nurturing. It's like there's so many positive words I could use about how the energy I felt from Jesus, and it's astounding how I've never had these feelings about Jesus at all before. It's always been something which I've been, oh, okay, yeah, fine. It's never been a connection. Whereas now I've made my own connection. It's like it's living and breathing within me. It's there. It's so true, and it's so vibrant. And it's really comforting to have that image as well. It feels really supportive.
and credit to you to being open to that, because that's part of what everybody who participates in this course brings is themselves. And again, going back to the first unit about being open-minded, and it's clear from what you've said that you embraced that sense of being open to whoever Jesus was. Brilliant. So thank you for that. Let us now think about where we can take the journey. So if it's possible to look at the next slide, please.
Absolutely.
Okay. We're going to look at both intellect and intuition. This is mainly, but not entirely, intellectual. These are some of the books that I've read, which may be of use to you. I would always recommend following books you're drawn to, but you can always use other people's experience. Starting at the top left there, we have Gospel Truth. It's a short book, and it really goes into some of the issues around the reliability of the Gospels, how they were put together. It's quite an easy read. Dr. Graham Stanton is actually fairly conservative Christian theologian, so what he says about the question marks over the Gospels is all the more interesting. Much longer read then is the 5 Gospels, the Jesus Seminar. It's an in-depth analysis. It includes the 5 Gospels, that's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, plus the Gospel of St. Thomas, and it explains some of the issues around reliability. What was it that Jesus really said? The introduction alone, I would say, is worth reading, and then they go through the Gospels and comment on them and colour code them according to their reliability. So if you like, that's a develops gospel truth into a more weighty read. Then we have Elaine Pagel's The Gnostic Gospels. She's not a Gnostic herself, but she writes, I think, with great empathy and understanding, and as well as academic rigour about the Gnostic Gospels. It's a classic work, well worth a read. Then we come to an unusual work, Jesus and the Essenes. The Essenes were one of a number of Jewish groups, along with the Pharisees and Sadducees. There is a story that Jesus spent his missing years with them, working on himself. And this book is really based about it. Now, Doris Cannon is not an academic, and she has quite limited knowledge, but what she does have about religion generally, but what she does have is a psychic insight. And she was guided into a story about Jesus and the Essenes. And part of it was her own education into learning more about the times and the ideas. And what I would have to say intuitively, as having read the book, is I thought she was pretty spot on. And it was really interesting, the contrast with an author who was not an academic, but by using her intuitive psychic gifts, actually arrived at a very profound truth. So for me, it resonated. Whether it resonates with anybody else is a different matter, but it's a really interesting insight. Then we come to Solar Encounters and God's Laughter. I need to declare an interest in this because my stepmother knew Marianne Dubois and indeed helped put this book together. But I get no financial kickback, I can promise. However, it's how I got to read them. And it rather echoes what you're describing about Jesus. These are conversations between Marianne Dubois and Jesus as he appeared to her. And his sort of cheekiness, very aliveness, you're not supposed to be saying thatness, really comes across in the books. And she asks him a lot of questions, and they're his answers. Now, obviously, they're going through the filter of her consciousness. But I think it's fascinating, and it's very much as you were describing, Jesus comes across as very alive and surprising. Then I entirely declare an interest in the last contribution, which are my own books, quite small books, which go into some of the issues in the course in a little bit more depth than I've been able to. You're welcome to have a look at them if you want to. Now that's mainly using your intellect, although as I say, particularly with the Horace Cannon book, and indeed with the Marion Dubar book, you know, the intuition is important role in that. Before I move on, any questions or comments?
It's interesting what you said about the Jesus and the Essenes, because throughout this course, I've got this feeling that Jesus himself had a lot of work to do on himself. And I've never read that anywhere else before. So the fact that somebody's got a book and he mentions it, I just intuitively feel like, I mean, everybody's got stuff they need to work on. Why not Jesus? And I do feel like he went for a period of time where he was working on himself and he was doing things to evolve himself.
So yes, and if you follow the model of Jesus channeling, as it were, Christ energy, that would fit into
that's
that.
what makes the most sense to me, is him, or like acting like a medium almost and channeling that Christ energy. That's what feels right to me.
Right. And then you couldn't just be anybody and channel that. You had to reach a certain level of spiritual advancement, enlightenment, purity, which is what really the Essenes specialized in. Again, it's a whole other topic, and I may do a course on Jesus and the Essenes later on. But what I would say is that it's worth exploring that connection.
Definitely.
And because she uses a spirit guide, psychic powers, she kind of cuts through a lot of stuff. Whether you accept what she says or not, of course, is entirely up to you. Intuitively, I thought this is right. This is absolutely spot on. But yes, so Jesus and the Essenes certainly is worth a read.
I should like to read that.
Well, there we are. Okay, so moving on then to the next slide.
Here we go.
So up to now, we've been talking about, I would like to know a little bit more. This is really taking us to the idea of, I would like to follow this, commit to this, develop this a little bit more in my own being. So I wanted to introduce the idea of Christ consciousness, what it meant. If we look at the image of the gas lamp there, we can see the brightness of the light depends on the cleanliness of the glass. If the glass is dirty, no matter how great the inner light, not much will get through. And indeed, in times of old, and indeed today, where we have these lamps, and you get people whose job it is to clean the glass. Now, if we take that image for the Christ light, the spiritual sun, if you were, to shine through oneself, it means doing work on yourself. It means cleaning the glass, working through your stuff, whether that be childhood trauma, addiction, whatever it is. But in a certain sense, it's about cleaning up your own act, and there are hundreds of ways of doing that. But it's the idea that if we want that kind of energy in our own lives and to shine through us, the compassion, the love, the wisdom, the strength, and so on that you've mentioned, that's the invitation. It doesn't happen by magic. It's rather interesting that you pointed out that Jesus had to do work on himself. So we follow that. Yeah, and so do we. So if that's what we want. So that's the invitation of Christ consciousness, that it's open to all of us what we need to do work, and it may take a long time. Is that making sense?
Yep, and that image of of the lamp is really useful actually. I can see how the light it would be dulled if the glass isn't clear, so it's important to shine the glass and then the light can shine through.
Okay, on to the next one.
Yep, that's fine.
There are lots of ways of working creatively with our understanding and knowledge of Jesus. Hundreds. What I'm showing you is a way of doing it based on my own experience. I did this about 20 years ago. Just to give people an idea. I intuitively had this idea of having spiritual celebration. It wasn't specifically about Jesus, but I read the part of the Gospels when he talks about sharing of bread and wine and doing this in his memory. And I just worked through a formula that worked for me about sharing bread and wine. Now, the first thing to be said about it, it's much older than Jesus. I mean, it appears in the Gospels, obviously, the famous Last Supper. But in fact, it's in the Hebrew scripture or Old Testament, where this mysterious figure, the high priest Melchizedek, king of Salem, peace, brought out the bread and the wine. He was priest of God Most High. So it goes back that far. It's in ancient Egypt. It's in a lot of ancient cultures, bread and wine. In some traditions, they represent the male and the female. So it's the beginning together of the male and the female. What we did in our meetings, so we just began with a meditation. And then we just sat down and shared bread and wine. And you'll see it says that we used non-alcoholic grape juice, and bread was of different kinds, including no gluten and what have you. So that kind of everybody could participate. We did it in silence, actually, simply so people could focus on what they're doing. You don't have to, but that's what we did. We did it and think about what it meant sharing bread and wine together. And in fact, we did share it together. And then we finished with a prayer. We give thanks for this act of coming together. May we share the fruits of our life and the warmth of our heart, stranger and friend alike. And then the third part was a time of spiritual creativity, where one or more people contributed something. We had a cellist, we had a poet, we had people read stories, whatever it was. But there was a bit so that individuals could express themselves. Ran it for a couple of years. It seemed to me to make it somehow real. It wasn't formal. Whoever turned up, turned up. You didn't have to believe anything in particular. It was more being intuitively drawn to that ceremony of sharing. And I'm interested in, of course, what you had said about holding together. And this was a way of bringing people together, because you could be an atheist and Christian and Jewish, whatever, pagan, and participate in the ceremony because you gave it the meaning you wanted to give it. What united us was the act. And I think spiritual ceremonies, celebrations, events, where it's open to people to give the meaning they want to give it, is one way forward, rather than saying, well, this is what this means, and this is, you know, this is the party line, as it were. So that's just one thought. But it was exciting to do. It was exciting to do, I must say. Okay, so anything on that?
It sounds like a really wholesome community, really positive energy. It sounds like it really is so welcoming to everybody, and that's what I personally feel like it should be about. Celebrating together, you know, we're all that sense of oneness together, that the community, the love, and as I've said, if you said the holding one another together, and without the words as well. I think sometimes without words there's more meaning almost. It's a deeper connection.
Absolutely. Another possibility, could we have the next slide, please?
Yes, we can.
Now, for those who tune into the idea of Jesus as a spiritual son, the son, S-U-N, of God, this goes right back to the beginning, doesn't it? Some people may like to meditate on the rising sun. Again, this is something I did for about a decade. Very interesting. The point about the rising sun, of course, is it's new every day, full of life, full of energy. It indeed is a form of yoga. It's called Surya Yoga. Yoga of the sun. Yoga means union, by the way. So a union with the sun, with sun consciousness, with its radiance, with its warmth. It's suggested it's best to practice this during the spring and the summer. It's where the sun is strongest, and also on a purely practical level, it's not too cold if you get up for sunrise. You find somewhere with a clear view of the horizon. Where I used to do it, there was a small hill. Absolutely health and safety, make sure to protect your eyes with sunglasses. You should never ever look at the sun without sunglasses, not even for a second. And so you get there obviously a little bit before sunrise, settle yourself, meditate, breathing exercises, whatever. And then as the first ray appears, you imagine it flowing through all of your body. It's almost like you drink it in and it flows through all of your body, bringing light and love to all your cells. And then you allow the light of the sun to flow from your being outwards to all humanity. And you can do it for half an hour, 20 minutes, whatever. The air, of course, at that time in the morning is very pure, very fresh. It's what the Hindus call prana. It's very good. And then as the sun rises, we can say a prayer. You can say any prayer you like, but this is the one I was given. As the sun rises above the world, so may the sun of love, wisdom and truth arise in our souls. So it's a meditation on the rising sun. Interestingly, one of the attenders to this course had as his starting point a sun rather than Jesus. And it's only through doing the course that the connection was made. And this was a particular interest to him. You can, of course, meditate on Jesus, which doesn't involve getting up at the crack of dawn. But that is certainly an amazing experience, meditation on the rising sun. So, where do we go from here? Well, some viewers may prefer to use established organizations, the various churches. We have the Catholic Church, various Protestant churches, Orthodox churches. I should also mention the Unitarians, which, as their name implies, believe in one God and Jesus as a human being. We have the Quakers, who work very much with the God within, the inner light. And then looking out towards Islam, where Jesus, Isa as he is called, is an honored prophet, as is his mother, also very revered. We can also think about working individually, working with like-minded people, a little bit like the spiritual celebration, what I call the tribe of unbelonging. In other words, working with people that don't fit into an established path. There are many options, and that's really the point. There are many possibilities. But I was wondering if I could hear from the most important person on this course, Megan, about what you would like to say to viewers from what you've learned.
I would say to trust your instinct, trust your gut reaction, and to follow that path of truth which you believe in. I'd say most importantly, from looking at things from more of an academic perspective, take things with a pinch of salt, have a look at them, think about the context of the times. I think that's really what shone out to me, is how things can be misinterpreted because of how, you know, it was 2,000 years ago, how times have changed, how the context have changed, how language has changed, and to really reevaluate how it might not necessarily be what it initially looks like, and to also think about how at the times there's different accounts, you know, there's all the different gospels, that's all different people's perspectives of the same happening. You know, if something happens in modern life, if you've got 10 people in a room, you're going to have 10 different accounts of how that one situation happened. So I'll say, yeah, looking at context of things, but also following your gut instincts, following what you believe is true, not being swayed by other people's judgments. Or it's good to listen to other people's perspectives, but really follow what you think, what resonates with you.
Yeah. And I think that's a very important point, really. So it's partly, again, we go back to partly using your intellectual skills and also your intuitive skills. Great. Well, thank you for that, Megan.
That's
and
okay.
Thank you for all you've contributed to the course, intellectually, intuitively, and not least technologically, without which I can safely say I would be like a terrapin on its back. So thank you very much for that. Can we move to your last ICT service, which is the contact details?
Yes, we can.
So if you would like to contact us, we have an email address, spiritoftherainbow@yahoo.co.uk. We have a website, spiritoftherainbow.org, from which, if you want to buy books, you can. So hopefully this will become part of an ongoing dialogue, and I'm always interested to hear people's experiences. And it's on that very point of experience that I want to finish with a story. Something that happened during the course of the recording of these videos. I had an inner vision, a very powerful one. I was standing looking at a golden statue of Jesus. It was magnificent. And then the statue just burst open with light, with the love of Jesus, and it poured straight into my heart. no theology, no doctrine, just love, simple, unconditional, divine love. That's all there was. And that, for me, was the message from Jesus. So on that experience, I will say goodbye.